Hello, it's me, and now that we've assembled, stickered, and I've properly loosened this thing, I think it's time to go through some of the strategies of solving because, there's particular kinds of strategies that you can derive from it, even if you don't have this puzzle as of yet. What's interesting about this one is this represents a quantum leap in terms of cuboid sizes. The 6x7x7, this is really, I guess you can say, the 7 series. Just as an example, starting off with, if we were to go 2 below, I don't really have much examples of a 6x6x(n) series. But if we go to the 5x5x(n) series, of course, we can start off with a 5x5x4. There's 5x5x3s that are out there too, but 5x5x4, and then going up from there, there's a straight 5x5x5, but then the 5x5x6, which is Tanner Frisbee's creation here, 5x5x7 by Ola Janssen. Now both of these, because they're odd to even asymmetric puzzles, they act as a cuboid. They move 90 degrees in this direction and only 180 degrees in this direction, which gives you the cuboid strategy basically. Same thing over here, 90 degrees in these directions here, only 180 degrees over here. Once you get to the 5x5x7 though, then you start to get into odd to odd symmetry, which means that you can now do 90-degree turns in all directions. You do 90-degree turns over here, of course, and then you can come over here and do 90-degree turns here and end up shape-shifting. So what you have is not just your classic cuboid strategy, what you also have is cubic strategy to get it back to the cuboid form, because now we've shape-shifted, so we'll need to get it back across the cuboid form. Moving up from the 5x5x7, we've got this handsome looking fellow over here, the 5x5x8, which although it's similar strategy, it's really just like the solve of here. We've just extended our layers down. We've just taken the cuboid from the 5x5x6 and gone to the 5x5x8. It doesn't shapeshift or anything, so it's really just a question of continuing the same strategies but with more layers. And if you like the shapeshifting, then after the 5x5x8, let's go to the 5x5x9, which really has the same appeal as the 5x5x7 because this too does 90-degree turns on all sides, which basically means that you use cubic strategy for the purposes of solving it. And it's really the same kind of thing here. This is a really nice puzzle here. I'll be demonstrating these at some future time, but really now we're just talking about same 5x5 cubic strategy, but then once we get it back to the cuboid form, we just have to deal with other layers. So it's the same kind of thing. Now, as you move off away from the 5-layer series, we start to expand off into the 6-layer series, and we have examples of different bricks that do that. The 4x5x6, it took the 5 layer and actually added an additional 6 layer over here. And this is variable in terms of what does 90-degree turns and what doesn't do 90-degree turns. So you do the classic cuboid strategy after shape-shifting it, getting it back to the cuboid form. And then, of course, our newer addition, the 3x5x6, which is really solved pretty much similarly. And the same thing holds here. You can do 180-degree turns in certain directions, and you can do 90-degree turns in other directions, such as, say, for instance, turn a 3 into a 5 here, say down here, and over here. So pretty much solved the same way. Alright, so expanding this out into the 7 series, basically the way to look at this is a cuboid that is 7 across and 7 back, and it's just 6 deep. What that means is when we have to put in edges, we have to expand our strategies a little bit. Now I'll tell you that what all of these have in common, and all of these have similarly, is that there's a certain parity that happens with this. Now when I say parity, I'm kind of using the term loosely by an organization that that's kind of inside the puzzle, where certain pieces will always be in association with each other in a specific way. In other words, if it's odd or even, because when we're talking about parity, we're basically talking about ones and zeros, yeses and nos, odds or evens. And if it's an odd numbered puzzle, then there's certain types of ways that it can be scrambled and certain types of ways that it can be solved. If I were to pop a piece out, put it back in, then I've broken the usual quote parity of the puzzle, which means I can no longer solve it the same way. Well, because these operate within the same dimension, I don't break that parity with any of these. So too with this. This is a 7-layer puzzle. It's an odd layer, well, I guess it has both odd and even layers, but there's a certain, quote, parity to this that doesn't get broken, which means as I'm putting in the edges here, and as we've learned from the barrel cube, if I just separate layers and slowly expand outwards, then it becomes solvable. So let's see if we can apply the known cuboid strategies to this, but see how we do it by adding extra layers and see that it's really the same kind of strategies. Just to go over the puzzle here, I did a lot of breaking it in, solved it a couple times. The one sticky layer was the middle layer, but this is the only time I've ever lubricated a creation by Gregoire Fenning. And I just lubricated the middle layer, and now it moves pretty seamlessly. So overall, with the black puzzle and the dyeing and everything that happened with this, I'm very, very happy with the quality. But really, we'll just go ahead and do a little bit of a scramble here just to show you some of the moves. Go here, then I'm just going to scramble it in this direction here. Now this is a very intricate puzzle. I showed you how I had to do a combination V6, V7 concept. I know that these tops, these dive right into the core. These 4 centers here don't. They're actually covering the core. So you can really see how odd to even movements are very different. So I'm going to continue the process of scrambling this. The other thing about this puzzle too is some of the pieces do tend to pop more often than others, but we're sort of testing the limits of engineering capacity with this, so it stands to reason. Those that pop out are easily placed back in, so it's not been a problem. And this is actually the first time I'm scrambling this and using this with a degree of lubrication that I've used on the middle layer. So I'm going to keep going like that, pick it up from there, abracadabra. Okay, not too bad. So I tried to scramble it pretty well, separating all things that seem to be correlating with each other too closely. Okay, so now what I said before about how this has an internal organization that makes it fairly simple, remember that, because there are going to be some future cuboids where parity can be broken. Actual parity situations that can truly happen with the cuboids where it doesn't fall together so simply. I actually have already demonstrated a cuboid where that happens. See if you can think about which one that is, but there will be future ones that have a similar kind of a problem. So we'll just kind of go through this and see how we can get through this marathon here. So the first step, as with all cubes, whether it's the 6x7x7 or the 6x6x6, this clicky little V-cube thing over here, I should probably modify that at some point. Anyways, to get your centers, of course. So now the way that this looks, being the typical odd to even asymmetric puzzle, is you have 2 sides that mix with each other, but no others, this white and yellow side, and then the rest of the 4 sides that mix with each other. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and get the centers of the top and the bottom, all of these over here. And that's fairly straightforward. I'm going to start off by matching up all the corners, rather the edge portions of the centers, and get as many in as possible. Maybe on the top layer here too. Yeah, that's pretty good for now. So what I'm going to do now is start to move the others in here. So I see this this yellow can go over to here. So what I'm going to do is move it in, and again I'm going to make use of the fact that I can isolate different segments and isolate different layers. So turn this here, so I've got this yellow over here, turn this across here. After I've isolated it, move it out of the way, out of the workspace so to speak, and then turn it back and turn it in. It's a very cute puzzle, very compact. Still have to use 2 hands because I don't want pieces popping and turn it in. So basically the overall result is I place that back in. And I just keep doing that. No tricks with this one. It's really as simple as it sounds. So now this yellow to come to here. So just to demonstrate that again, this is really just big cube strategy. Now I'm going to go an extra step actually. These 4 here can be placed perhaps under these 4 here. Now it'll knock this out, but that's a sacrifice I think we can make. So I'm going to put this over here. So all these 4 will occupy this workspace. So I'm going to move this in here. So now I've created this whole layer here, so to speak. Move it out of the way. And then move it down. Move it back, and now I'm just going to reverse what I did. In essence, that's kind of what a commutator is. Do a series of moves and then reverse it. Move this back over here, and bang. So the end result is I did indeed put all those in. So I'm just going to keep following suit. Down, turn, turn. Now you can apply this strategy to any big cube and any big cuboid. Whether it's the 5x5x4, 5x5 by whatever you got, or whatever you're going to get. The strategy is the same. Now there's another concept to cuboids that I've not mentioned yet that I will. And I wonder if you guys can guess what I'm being very mysterious about. Something that breaks the usual cuboid parity. This can come to here. Turn. 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 Turn it back. You can see it was the middle layer that I moved. That's why this doesn't look like the right middle layer. Turn this back in. Turn, and in a relatively short period of time, I suppose, we have our centers here and here. Now, that was the easiest of steps. Now we've got to get these centers. If this were a purely 90-degree turner, like this guy over here, or this guy over here, then we can get the other centers exactly the same way, but we can't. We need to use a little more strategy. The same way that I had to do with this guy. Well, no, not this guy, with this guy. And with this guy, and to an extent this guy. Alright, so how am I going to do this? Well, in order to get all of these centers in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the concept of there being a workspace and then a place where I put things. So I'm going to start to get layer by layer the different sides. I'm going to be putting in 1x5 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first thing I'm going to do is look to see where most of them are already done, which is here. So I'm going to put in this bar over here. And I'm actually going to try to get one side, then another side's centers, and move on from there. So this can come into here if I just move it opposite here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and just put it in place. So this is my workspace. So this is my workspace here. Move it into here. And we've got that over there. All I got to do now is take it out of my workspace. And now I'm going to move it back. Turn and turn. So now I'm going to keep going with that. I'm going to keep getting my yellows. So here's a couple yellows here. Is there another middle over here that I can use? And let's see over here. So I'm going to move this out of the way, double turn it so that I'm free to move this part over here. And now what I did is I put this in my workspace. And with that, I'm going to double turn this here and here. So now I've got that. Now before I move this out of the workspace, let me put the other one in. So where's the other one that is going to go here, which is right over here. So I'm going to double turn this. The good thing about the first two centers, or the first center rather, is that I've got a lot of freedom of movement here. Turn it like so. Now as long as these are lined up, I don't want to destroy my centers much. Double turn. Okay, so this is in. What I'm now going to do is put it out of my workspace. Bump it to the side. And now what I can do is I can just put everything back. Just like this. Okay, so these two are in, and now I'm just going to do the other portions of it. So what already has a bunch? Well, I've got two over here, so why don't I just start sequentially moving others in. So this can come down to here. Well, no, it already has a space. Two at the end. So let me move this over here. The reason that I did that is because I want to move this one in. So that's what I'm going to do. Double turn. And there you have it. And while I'm in the neighborhood, I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep sequentially moving the layers over for the purposes of moving other ones in. So this can come in, double turn, and now this is in. Now I want to put one over here. And what's going to do that? It's something that's 2 over, probably this over here. So the way I'm going to treat this is double turn this side, move this in, and move this down. Okay, so we've got that layer, and I'm just going to bump this to the side. Now what I can elect to do, so I don't get confused, is move these here. Now, you may notice that I might be flipping these sides back and forth. It really doesn't matter at this point. I'm not going for the orientation of the centers, I'm just putting centers in. This may have been white before, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. So now I'm going to finish up with my orange side. And this is pretty simple. I'm just going to keep moving things in through the different layers. So I'm very happy with it. And bang. Okay, so that was easy, right? Not a problem. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my center in here just for the sake of perspective. Okay, so that's here. Now the next thing that's going to go in my workspace, the way that I like to do these is I want to put in the centers that are opposite each other. So if I did orange, I'm going to do red next. So let's see what reds are already mostly solved. This one is mostly solved here. So now, because I have this sitting here, I have to put it in, bump something out of the way, and then replace it with something else if I want to put it in my workspace, which is here. These two areas are my workspaces. So I'm going to move this into my workspace, like this. But I did just bump this orange layer into the workspace here, so what I have to do is I have to do a 2F so that I can move my orange back, so I don't adversely affect that one. Okay, so now this is here, and I'm just going to start putting in reds. This red can come over to here, double turn, and there it is. So that was simple enough. Let's move this out of the way, out of the workspace into here. So I'm going to just put this here. Now I got to replace it with another one so I can bump this back, so double turn here, and turn it back. Okay, now before I turn this back, I'm not even going to worry about putting that back in. As long as these layers are consistent, I'm just going to keep making motions and movements and changes. I've got 2 over here, so why don't I start moving these reds into this layer, start building up the next red layer. Why don't I move this into here? So I'm going to move this into here, double turn, move it back. So I have to keep doing that double turning and moving things back lest I undo other things that I've done. So I've got 2 here that I can move in. So I've got a whole layer over here for the center. So now I'm going to take this and move it out of my workspace over here. Double turn it here. Now I have to switch it with this layer. So double turn here and move it back. That way I can move this back over here. These concepts should be familiar to you if you've done earlier cuboids. If not, let me know. I'll slow it down. Okay, I've got 2 over here, so why don't we start working on that. Double turn that here, and then there was 3. Anything else here in that layer that I can use? Yeah, sure. How about this one over here? There's 3. Double turn it here, and then there was 4. Now we want the 5th one. The 5th one, which is right here, and that's going to be this guy here. I'm just going to double turn that like so, and then move it in. Don't worry about the mess that I'm making here, because again, as long as there are layers here, I can move them back at any time. So now I'm going to put this into here. If I'm skittish about this orange one, which I am, let's just move it back. No worries. See? Okay, now I need to move this into here. Anytime you want to move something move something into a side, but you don't want to bump something else out, then move it into where you want to replace it with. So I want this to come up to here, but I don't want this to be bumped out. So what I'm going to do first is place this here, bumping out that red layer. Then I'm going to double turn, and this way I can bring that red layer right back. Alright, so now I've got these over here. Okay, continuing, this is all but almost completely made. And because this is the last layer, I just need these two to be put in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this into the workspace. Then I got to double turn it so I can move that layer back. So these can all come back where it came from whence it came. And now I know it's going to be aligned, these two, so I'm just going to move them in. Move them in. Move them in. You know, you don't realize this with a lot of these Shapeways products, but there's a lot of breaking in that has to happen. So when you get this fully assembled, understand the designer probably did a lot of turning and breaking in before that, because you could see how stiff it is at first when it first comes out of the production line, so to speak. So now this has to come into here, so I move it in, bump this out of the way, turn it, and move it back. Alright, so that replacement technique is a key technique of dealing with different layers. And move it back. Okay, so this layer, this centers in, and now this centers in.